Okay, so this is a scene that I came across on the tube on the way to somewhere last week. The gentleman in the brown hat on the right of the screen, the guy wearing the blue clothes, he is looking at what looks like an iPad Pro. So that's like a £1,000 device. The woman sat in the middle of the frame, the Asian looking woman, in the pink trousers and the kind of light grey coat. She's holding an iPhone 15 Pro Max. I know because I have one, so I recognised it. That's about £1,000 phone. Again, you can get them a bit cheaper now because they're about a year old. So they're both holding £1,000 devices and they're sat next to the exits of a carriage on the busiest line of one of the busiest cities in the world. And they're both happily, merrily doing this, and neither of them respond as I get on the tube. And I get on the tube along with the guy who's on the left of the frame. Now, he's interesting. Let's have a look at him, right? He's wearing dark, pretty much nondescript sporty clothes. You won't be able to identify him by his clothing. You won't remember anything about his clothing. He is a bit taller than average. He's in the prime of his life. He looks fit, athletic, slim, strong. Just looking at his hands, I've been looking at fighters and athletes for a very long time. Sometimes some people just have great genetics, but this guy looks in good shape. In short, he's of fighting age and he has a soldier's frame, potentially. So this guy moves, it could well be consequential. One security guard friend of mine, he actually gave me a really interesting insight into their work. He said, as a security guard to a retail environment, one of the things that we look out for when people come into the premises is the shoes they're wearing. Are the shoes good for running? Right? This guy's wearing shoes that are good for running. Yeah. And the other thing is, he's not carrying anything. So if all of these things were true, but he had like a baby in his arms, or he was pushing a stroller, or he had just like heavy bags of stuff with him, then I would think of him as less of a threat. But he's not carrying anything that's going to impede him when he begins to move. He's not even wearing a small backpack. So he is set up for movement. So I want to come to the main issue here, and that is obviously that he's completely covered his face. He's completely covered his face. He's wearing a face mask, and it's one of those neoprene type stretchy face masks. It's not got any medical value to it, right? It's not going to protect you against COVID or anything like that. And no one else on this carriage is wearing a face mask, right? So he might be wearing it for medical reasons, but people who wear masks for medical reasons tend to be wearing the N95 type masks, not this type, right? And then he's also covered the top of his head with a hood. And not only is it a hood, but it's also a drawstring hood, right? So it's a hood that's tight. And what does that mean? It means it's not going to come off when he, again, moves. So he's concealed his identity so that you're not going to be able to identify pretty much any distinguishing features of him. You're not going to be able to say anything useful about this guy if he does something. The moment I've seen him, I've kind of taken this picture and then put my phone away, right? And then we're beginning to look at his shoes and his hands. So I'm aware of him peripherally. But these people here, neither of them are going to be physically capable of putting up pretty much any kind of significant resistance if this guy decides to move, right? They're not physically sturdy or strong or a match for him, and they're not ready, okay? And you could argue, well, they could afford to lose those devices. Isn't it wonderful that we live in a civilization where people can afford to take these kind of risks? Well, you might be able to afford to lose £1,000 because you can get a phone on finance or something like that. But have a look at this BBC News story from back in December where the attackers stole like £21,000 out of his account and took a £7,000 loan out in his name. It's a complete nightmare. So when people steal these devices off you, they don't just get the device, which they're going to sell, but they also have access to all of potentially your finances and your contacts. Are you able to actually absorb that, for instance? I teach defending against snatch attacks quite often, quite a lot more than other Krav Maga instructors that I've met. And I do that because, in my opinion, they're actually what happens to people. So I read somewhere, I think, in the statistics that we get about 33,000 of these types of attacks in England and Wales each year, compared to, say, 700 or so murders and attempted murders with a knife. But very often as Krav Maga instructors, we are still kind of stuck in the legacy mode of it being a system born from war, born from use by soldiers. So we're quite keen to teach you, say, how to deal with someone trying to stab you with an overhand stab with a knife. But we don't actually teach you how to deal with someone trying to steal your stuff. So that, I think, is an issue with a lot of self-defense instruction. So I teach how to deal with situations where people are trying to snatch things off you. So here's some footage of a student who's trying to knee someone who's trying to snatch a phone out of their hands, right? And I'll show you. I'll put up a Reddit on the screen afterwards, where I think this came up a few days ago, where it was like someone had attempted to snatch a phone on the tube, and pretty much it looked exactly like this, you know, with overlapping hands and trying to pull the phone out of the guy's hand. Here's some footage of two students training to defend against a bag snatch, right? So hitting the attacker, using the bag against them, and then running off. That training is, I think, more useful than learning how to deal with someone trying to shank you. But at the same time, the truth is that these techniques shouldn't be necessary. These tactics shouldn't be necessary, because actually you can deal with most of these type of situations just with awareness alone. Here's Jeff Cooper, the guy who came up with his color codes for awareness, talking about the power of awareness.
It was fascinating. A couple of years ago, they had a test in, the results were printed in Science Digest. They took a group of about 15 violent felons. I guess you'd call them muggers, although I don't like the term mugging. It sounds more innocent than it is. You know, mugging is not a matter of play. Well, these people were in the habit of taking people on the street by force and violence with screwdrivers and things, hammers. And they showed them street scenes separately, not in a group. And they asked, then they compared notes on which guys would you take and which guys would you not. And it was remarkable how close the correlation was. These people were practically 100%. They'd say, I wouldn't take him. I sure as hell would take him. Now, what was the difference? The target picked out was unaware. Head down, eyes forward, no feeling of alertness. You can turn off a certain portion of violence just by coming out and looking at everybody, because that puts you in category B as far as the strong arm talk goes.
So snatch thefts are really, really common on the London Underground. And here was a poster that I came across literally as I came out of the tube at Canada Water, where I teach, literally telling people to be aware of snatch thieves, right? I think on TFL's website, they're actually trying to explain that one of the main kind of ways that thieves operate on the tube is as snatch thieves, right? So they're going to be doing exactly potentially what this guy's thinking of doing here, standing by an exit and then thinking about stealing high value devices from people with low levels of awareness and arousal, running out the door as the doors close, leaving them with no chance of actually responding or identifying them or holding them to account in any kind of way. What we need to realize about people like this is that in their kind of sociopathic, predatory, resource predatory kind of brains, people who behave in this kind of very unaware, relaxed way with high value objects, they're making themselves into their natural prey, right? Have a listen to this guy who's a phone thief speaking in a documentary from a few years back.
Do you think people are stupid walking around with their phones out like that?
Of course, you're asking for it, in my opinion.
But it's so normal.
It's not normal. How are you crossing the road? There was a woman just now crossing the road with a phone, looking down, look. That's not normal. You're crossing the road. You should have all eyes on the road.
So yeah, the person crossing the road looking at their phone is not normal, right? Not him, the phone thief. And yeah, that's abhorrent. It's completely wrong. But the reality is that's just how they think. And we have to accept that that's how they think. And we have to adapt to that if we're going to be students of self-defense. We need to have a degree of awareness which is more than the people in this photograph. Because that awareness is enough probably to protect ourselves so that we don't actually have to use our training. The clickbaity kind of title to this video was "Awareness is better than Krav Maga. But the truth of it is that awareness should be absolutely central to all self-defense training. Awareness is more important than self-defense, right? Because awareness is what gives us the time to defend ourselves, gives us the opportunity to take the initiative in a situation. And awareness is also just an attribute which flows into other aspects of our lives. It should be part of the very fabric of what we actually teach. The problem is it's quite difficult to kind of train and teach and explain awareness in a class context when we're all together. It makes more sense to work on techniques, right, than to be aware of something like what we're looking at in this photograph. So I think it works better for us to deal with situations like this in a kind of lecture video format like this. But make no mistake, in my opinion, this is actually more important than the kind of techniques that we cover in class. So yeah, simple adjustments based on awareness should mean that you don't ever have to use your training. Stay alert, people. See you on the mats. Walk in peace.